Hello, everybody. Um, hope hope your days all are going well. Um, got Joe backstage. I'm gonna get started with my introduction, and uh, and then we'll get her started. Um, so first off, oh, this is going to be a 40-minute session, 20 minutes roughly of content, and 20. Well, we're just going to do Q&A, I think, for most of it, but. Um, I'm here as tech support and to monitor the chat. Um, if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat. If you'd like to talk, we have ways to do that. You can raise your hand, but just put your question in the chat. Um, keep the questions relatively friendly, avoid abusive behavior in the chat. And with that, let me introduce our speaker and switch. There we go. So we've got Joe from Fake History Hunter. Um, scrolling down. There is it. There it is. Joe's been obsessed with history since childhood, worked for film TV as a historical consultant researcher for decades, and then started hunting fake history online, got a book deal, and wrote a best-selling book. So, welcome, Joe. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for speaking here today.
I noticed you didn't try my last name.
I did not. I'm sorry.
So it's a very, very smart decision. It's very, very Dutch.
So one thing that I noticed going over your intake materials and everything, you said when we asked what your favorite kind of dumpling was, you said that you didn't think you've ever had one.
Yeah, doesn't ring a bell. I mean, I know what it is, but only from American television. I'm sure we've got one, something similar over here, but with a different name. But I've
Sure. Yeah.
no idea.
It's one of these things. I picked that question because it's it seems like a thing that every culture has some kind of dumpling. So
I'm sure we do, but I can't think of what it's called over here, what it's looked like. And to be fair, I'm a culinary barbarian as well. So
okay,
it's like I've got a sandwich with cheese on it. That was my meal today.
okay, cool. Yeah. All right, so kick us off.
Well, I'll make a short introduction, just a little bit who I am, where I'm from. I'm from the Netherlands, clogs, windmills, all that sort of thing. And yes, I wear clogs every day, seriously. I grew up in the 1970s, and when I was very young, I looked out the window and I realized that I suddenly understood what history was. I remember that vividly, understanding that there were people who lived before us in the same place. And I looked at the window and I started crying. And my hippie mother looked at me and said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "I've seen a picture of what this street looked like in 1900. And now I look at the window and everything is ugly." And my mother thought, "Oh God, we've got a history addict on our hands." And that was true. And I've been obsessed with history ever since. It's just everywhere I go, from as long as I can remember, I've always been thinking about history, reading about history. And then I learned something new about history, which is also fascinating, is that sometimes what we know and what we are taught is nonsense, or what we think we know changes because we discover something new. And I was fascinated by that as well. And I really enjoyed that. And I worked for a while in museums and in archaeological theme parks, or where the public could go and see how people lived in the past. And there I learned that correcting people is a lot of fun. And it's probably a very bit of a sadistic streak I have. Because I remember being in that museum and talking to a classroom with a teacher, and the teacher was telling his entire classroom something about daily life in the Middle Ages, and I got to correct him in front of his pupils. And I feel a bit bad, but it was such fun because all the kids suddenly were so much more interested in the subject because their teacher was wrong. That was a lot of fun. So my official career started in film and television. I was a director, a writer, did a million other things as well. I even did a bit of special effects, you know, blowing stuff up. I did a bit of stunting.
Really?
I've had a really, really weird career. I've done all sorts of jobs. Some I'm not even allowed to talk about.
Oh, geez.
But they all involved in explosions and jumping off things and meeting handsome, rich, famous film stars. But eventually, I discovered that my true passion lay with history. I just couldn't stop thinking about it, and I've only made a few short productions for television, and they were all about history. And I remember walking around on a historical film set and my cameraman coming to me and saying, listen, you've been walking around for 20 minutes just staring at everything with a stupid grin on your face, but we're supposed to be making a film, remember? And then I realized that I was only doing this because I loved the history. So I changed my career. I sold my production company and I became a historical consultant. I would just go to film sets and tell everyone what they were doing wrong. And that was a lot of fun. And then after a long career, and that was probably the best job I've ever had, I decided that I've had enough. You know, I moved to the countryside, settled, got a dog, got a garden, got too many cats, as you're supposed to. And then I thought, you know, let's have a look on the internet and see if maybe there's someone there who is wrong about history. And well, that's about it, really. To my shock and horror, Twitter is full of people who are wrong about history, and they are so convinced that they're not. So I started correcting them, and I corrected. The funny thing is that if I correct someone and they are grateful, and they say, "Oh, thank you, that's really interesting," you know, they're very happy to learn something. That feels really good. But if someone gets hysterically angry and starts stamping their little feet and bringing in sources that they think prove their claim and arguing with you, uh, and you know, and swearing and screaming, that is also fun to me. So regardless what happens, I'm very entertained, and that got a little bit out of hand. I got a lot of followers, and it's a lot of fun. It's almost a day job now, which is ironic because I started after I sort of decided to stop doing work very much. And that's how I became the fake history hunter. And of course, once you get a lot of attention on social media, sooner or later, you know, companies and publishers and start to ring your phone and are you interested in making a book? So I wrote a book, and that went really well. And just finished my second, and planning many more. So that's sort of how it started. And what I do is I'm just on the internet. I've got a long list of topics. Most of the topics are subjects I'm very interested in. For instance, I only have one topic about sports on my list that I correct now and then. But most of the topics are subjects I'm fascinated by, I'm interested, I enjoy discussing. I'm not going to have a long discussion with someone about a topic that I'm not interested in. So I just get my list, I throw it at the search engine on Twitter if it works, because it's, you know, it's been messed up for a while. And if I find someone who posts something that I know is wrong and that I can prove is wrong, I correct them. Like the really annoying but well-known meme of the nerd going, actually, that's me. That's what I do. And that is about it. I live on my farm in the countryside. I look after the animals. I sit in front of the fireplace. Look, there it is. And when I'm done with my chores during the day, walk my dog, I go online and make a nuisance of myself. And that is about it. My favorite topics are daily life in medieval Europe. I've always been fascinated by medieval Europe, but it's also one of those subjects that is somehow extra attractive to people to believe myths about. We just want it to be a certain way. We have this image in our head, and it comes from film and television, but also from schools and even museums. We are taught so much that is, to put it politely, it's a bit outdated. You know,
Mhm.
we've discovered new things we know now it's not true. I'm not here going to tell you that all the teachers in schools are wrong, or at least not on purpose.
Yeah.
But you know, the problem with history is that we learn new things about the past almost every day, and you know, we can now read scorched scrolls, you know, that were
Right.
burned 2,000 years ago. That is insane. With DNA, we are now tracking how the Black Death literally moved from village to village during the Middle Ages, and learning new things again, well, almost every day. It is fantastic, but it sometimes changes everything we know. I mean, tomorrow, one of my most famous corrections that is quite popular is telling people that Vikings didn't have horns on their helmets. Most people know that now these days, but there are still a few who don't. But technically, next week, an archaeologist could find a Viking helmet with horns on it, which would, I personally would love that, even though it meant I've been wrong for a very long time. Oh, that'd be so cool. But just to illustrate that everything we think we know could change tomorrow, and that makes it extra interesting. So
Mhm.
it's medieval Europe, but I'm more interested in daily life of common people than the royals. I mean, I leave the correcting of stories about the Tudors and the kings and queens and famous, you know, army leaders and politicians to the people who are experts in that subject. I'm just trying to say, you know, this is what life, this is what we think life was like, and I especially enjoy telling people that it wasn't as bad as they thought, because people usually either think it was much worse than it was, or they think it was much better than it was. So you're somehow either correct, you're always correcting someone, and it's fascinating that you can tell someone. You can 1 minute you're telling someone that life in the Middle Ages was a lot better than they thought, and then the next minute you're telling someone that it wasn't as good as they thought. Somehow we want to either romanticize or what's the opposite of romanticize? Denegatize. Just made that word up. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Um, oh, hello,
Oh.
go away, cat. But this is the first animal that will join us, I'm sure. So that is fascinating, and I really enjoy doing that as well. You know, giving people a completely new view of the past, and it's also a bonus that I ruin the television and film joy of many people. I'm getting DMs of people saying, well, I'm no longer allowed to talk during films because of you. And I say, well, you're very welcome. I've not been allowed to talk during films for a very long time. But you know, I had one DM of a very proud mother telling me that her son made a tour guide in a castle almost cry because her 11-year-old told them that everything they said was wrong and started correcting them based on what they read in my book. I'm sorry to all the castle guides. I know you're doing your best and you're only telling people what you're taught to tell them, but I must admit I was a bit proud of that as well. So that is pretty much in short my story. That there are some subjects that I have no interest in until someone asks me about it. I get a lot of people saying, "Have you seen this tweet? Is it true?" And I go, I have no idea." But I am addicted to researching. I love researching, especially when it has a fascinating image attached to it. And I go, is it real? Is it not real? Where is it from? When was it first uploaded? You can do image reverse searches. I've got several programs that can do that for me. And sometimes it's really, really easy to find the truth about an image. It can take just a couple of seconds, but nobody bothers. And that I find fascinating as well. I mean, when I was a kid, I'd go to school, and if a bully came up to you, you tell them, yeah, well, go away because my dad is a cop and he has a gun and a sword and you know, and he does karate. And then the bully would go, oh yeah, prove it, and you'd be busted. Your world of lies would crumble. And somehow that's how I always continued to go on with my lies, I always thought I can only lie about things that I can prove. So, if I got into fights, I always was honest about my abilities, and I never told anyone that my father was a cop, because he wasn't. He was a hippie. So, but somehow when people go online these days, they seem to have lost that critical edge. They go, oh, you saying this on Twitter? Well, it must be true. Okay, bye. And they share it. And on Facebook, it's even worse. Everyone shares everything, and nobody seems to fact check anything anymore before they share it, which is which I find strange, but it keeps me off the street, gives me something to do. And of course, unfortunately, fake history has always been around. People have always been telling lies, exaggerating, adding to stories. They've been painting paintings that don't quite depict reality. They've been editing photos pretty much since photography was invented, changing things. One of the oldest photos that exists is a man pretending that he's a drowning victim. Don't ask me why. It's a weird story. But, fake history has always been around. But these days, it has become, I think, more dangerous, because it has changed from a trickle into a tsunami. Not just because of the internet. I mean, I can tell a lie on Twitter now, and it could have been seen by 1 million people within minutes. And that is dangerous. But thanks to AI, people can make fake photos. They can create a story that somehow reads believable, because AI is pretty decent at grammar and making up stuff, ironically. And especially if you go on Facebook, it is insane. The obviously fake AI images are being shared. They just go around, and you look at the comments, and there's people going, oh, wonderful, and thoughts and prayers, and fantastic, and they share it with their family. And sometimes you get a message and you see, don't you see that this is fake? Can't anyone see it? Sometimes it feels like we are in a room with a naked emperor, and nobody dares to say that he's not dressed. It's that old story. And the problem is also that anyone can do it. Anyone can create what for a lot of people may be a realistic fake photo. And you can do it in seconds, and you can share it with millions in seconds. And that's what brings us to a new situation in history. It's never been this big. We're literally up to here in fakeness, and the danger of it is very obvious in politics and in hate that's being spread around the internet. We see that a lot. But it also exists in history, and this history is sometimes, again, used for the same reasons. But we look at it, and we sometimes don't make the direct connection. But for instance, recently I saw a photo from the 1950s, and it saw a street in an American city, and everyone was happy and everyone was smiling, and it was AI. I mean, I'm not saying that such photos don't exist, because they do, but it is an image of that era that people are trying to spread, and they use AI for it, and they use fake history for it. And that is disturbing. And sometimes it's just innocent, because someone says, look, here's a photo from 1900 of a cute kid with a dog. I mean, that's not going to harm anyone, but it's still fake.
Yeah.
And people, and of course, and some generations don't have this automatic filter of being cynical or suspicious, which I guess is sort of a good thing as well. But there is a little hope that I know that a lot of young people these days, and they shouldn't go overboard to the other side, but they are very suspicious of everything they see. And that, of course, brings also a danger with it, because we have people going, here's a photo that I want to share, and there's people going, oh, that's AI, and then they say, no, it's not. So that is happening. But there are also people going, not trusting the experts anymore. Look, here is someone who works at a museum, who has done research for 30 years, and they know what they're talking about. you know, not saying that they can't be wrong, but people believe them, and then so some people automatically also no longer believe the experts. So that's also a danger. So we're in a really weird situation where we shouldn't believe everything, but still believe some things. But at the same time, we're drowning in fakeness. So it's a really weird thing, and it's getting worse, and it's making my life a lot busier. But I
Well,
think,
we've
yeah, I think that is about it. That is pretty much what I do. That's how I work. It's just doing lots and lots of research, and having a lot of nerd friends. If I find something that is suspicious, and it can be something as strange as a 1920s Matchbox label. I know a guy who knows everything about Matchbox labels.
nice.
If you want people to think that you're smart, collect as many nerds as you can, because they are the best people. And I'm one of them, but I've got nerd friends of a different level that can help me find everything if I'm stuck. So that's also really handy.
Cool. So we've got some a good bunch of questions in the chat now. So uh, first one that came up is, what's the most memorable stunt you did?
Blow up a bird.
A bird.
Yeah, it wasn't a real bird, but it was quite funny. We had this hallway, and birds were flying through it, and there was one sitting on a chair, and it would explode. I've never seen the film. I have no idea what was going on. But I had also no experience with explosives, except as a child, the neighborhood I came from, we used to blow up stuff with fireworks
Sure.
regularly. But the head of special effects just said to me, "Can you just put some explosive in that bird? Here they are," and you push the button, it explodes. And I said, "Oh, okay." No permits, no training, no nothing. The good old days.
Yeah.
So I did, and it was a lot of fun. But the most frustrating stunt I did was when we had an actress who had to jump from a sort of building, but it was only like 6 feet. It was nothing, and there was a mattress, and she was hysterical. And I had to jump off and down to show her how it's done. You can't hurt yourself. And eventually, the director said to me, "Push her." Which today would probably end up with me being sued or something like that.
Right, right.
But I didn't, back then we didn't care. So eventually they just said, "Right, we're going to film now." And she said, "Oh, no, can't you?" And I just went boink, and she fell. And for about 10 minutes, she wanted to kill me. And then the next day, she hugged me and loved me and said, "Oh, thank you so much. I couldn't have done it without you." It was tiresome.
Um, so do you think, well, let me see. Do you think film/television is any use in terms of informing people about historical narratives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are films and television shows that are absolutely fantastic and brilliant. We've just had one. I'm terrible at names. It's about the Tudor era. It's about the court. It was very well done, big budget, BBC production, lots of research. Um, so if it's done right, it can be Wolf Hall. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That's a good example of a great show. But even bad shows can do a lot for history. I looked back the children's shows that I loved as a child that made me fall in love with history even more, and they're rubbish. When you look them back 30, 40 years later, you go, "Oh my God, that is so bad." But I remember as a kid looking at it and going, my brain going, "One day you'll be a time traveler." That sort of nonsense. So I'm relatively tolerant towards bad television, as long as they're not purposefully lying. Because for instance, I'm so bored with every medieval or any historical film these days having this blue-gray filter where everything
Yeah.
looks drab and dark and all the color is sucked out of it. It's slowly changing, but humans, we are a shallow bunch. We've loved colors since the beginning of time. Um, every bit of evidence that we have is, for instance, that the medieval people, the medieval era, was very, very garish. If you'd go into a medieval castle, you'd go, oh my God, they painted all the walls with every color you can imagine. That is slowly changing, and that's really good. Um, a lot of film and television shows make the myths that are alive only live longer and stronger. And for instance, Vikings, I think it's the History Channel, ironically.
Yeah.
I mean, the Vikings did not look like some leather gay biker gang. The hair, the tattoos, it's all silly. And I'm not even talking about the stories. I'm fine with the stories. Go on, do what you want. But for me, showing the right image is such an important step, and they keep getting that wrong.
What are the best ways to network with subject matter experts in your experience?
Just bother them. Just harass them. I generally just email them. I don't care. I just go, I saw you, I've just read your book, and on this page you claimed this, but you didn't mention a source. Do you have a source? And then sometimes you get an email back, sometimes you don't. But one of them emailed back and said they couldn't remember. So the next day I was on Twitter telling people, well, you shared that book, but the writer doesn't even remember. So that's a bit dangerous. But yeah, I just email them. Most of them are these days are on social media. You can tag them, DM them. If they don't want to talk to you, they just don't respond. So no harm done. Um, yeah, these days, luckily, if you have a bit of a name, if they've heard of you via you heard somewhere, they usually respond. And if you're talking to someone in the same who writes about history, who has the same, they usually have the same sort of mad, addictive nature towards that subject. So they sometimes find it irresistible to respond, and you can just
Hmm.
just play with that. just make use of their addiction.
Right. The next person said, I saw that you worked on a VR recreation of the Anne Frank house. What was the research for that like?
Oh, that was a really fantastic project to work on. At the time, because I had my historical consultancy, I was in my country, I was the person, the only person who you would call if you were making a project about the 1920s, 30s, or 40s, because that was what I was specialized in. Um, sorry, excuse me. Um, so when they are working on that project, this company that was making the virtual recreation, the Anne Frank house themselves said, well, you got to call her because she knows everything. I've worked on exhibits for museums in Amsterdam, World War II exhibits as well. I was a regular visitor at the Anne Frank house, so they knew me. So that was an automatic. So usually it was the first email they sent when they worked on a project set in that era. Um, and how it usually went is that they call me and they say, well, we are making this and we are looking for something. I don't know, just say something random. We are looking for original 1930s socks. you know, because if you want to decorate a home from the 1930s, you need little things, little common things. And museums are full of the rare and fantastic objects that belong in museums. But if you want 1930s socks, what do? Well, you call me. And you get an email from someone saying we've been looking for 1930s socks for weeks now and we can't find them anywhere. And my answer would then be, how many do you need? Because I have a box full of them. So when they realized that, I got a very, very long list of all the things they wanted to put in Anne Frank's in the hiding place to decorate the home with. And I gave them tips. I did a bit of research for them because they, for instance, didn't know about blackout. It's one of those things that everyone who lived through the war knows about, but somehow everyone who works on projects about the war doesn't seem to know about. Every film or television series set in the Second World War, you see all the lights on at night. And I just had to just reviewed a new World War II game, Sniper Elite, because I'm also a gamer. I have been since Pong. That's how old I
Nice.
am. And one of my friends worked on that game, so I had to warn him. I said, I'm going to have to bring it up. And he said, "Oh, it's fine. We know." So even in the game, they didn't put the blackout in as it should. But yeah, that was a really, really great project to work on and very rewarding. I've done a few other things with Jan Frank House, and I was I was paid quite well, but I was also paid in a way that nobody else, that you can't even imagine how valuable it is. I was given a letter by Otto Frank.
Oh, cool.
It was a letter for someone else. It wasn't for me, of course,
Right.
because he
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
died. But they have a lot of correspondence, and one of those things they just had, they said, well, you did so much. We want you to have it. That was really nice. That was a valued treasure. Um, but yeah, when you then also see the result, you realize that for a lot of people, this is the first time that they see how Anne Frank and her family and the other people there really lived in hiding,
Right.
because the house is empty and it's always been empty since the war. So seeing it alive and seeing the little things and the remnants of the people that live there, that makes it a very different experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so Ethan is the a gaming historian, and he says that he should put you in touch with his Dutch game historian friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Do it.
We can work that out offline. Um,
I've just finished Kingdom Come Deliverance 2.
great. I know a bunch of people have been playing that. Let me see. Um, so how much of a disservice do Twitter accounts like the cultural tutor, which puts on Greek classic picture on their profile, do in spreading misinformation?
Um, well, on Twitter, the strange thing is of course, the bigger an account, the more people see the stuff they spread. So the risk is bigger. If you're hearing strange sounds, that's my dog going a bit mad here. but but yeah, but on Twitter, even an account with just 2 followers can go viral. So uh, all it takes is getting someone's attention. But of course, an account that has hundreds of thousands or millions of followers uh, does more damage in a shorter time. And especially if an account has an obvious bias or an agenda, or sometimes not so obvious, then that the damage they do becomes bigger. And that is a real issue. And thanks to community notes, we can sometimes take a few of those things down a few pegs, but it's very difficult. I write a lot of community notes, only a couple get through. These big accounts, they sometimes have defenders. In the community notes program, you get people trying to defend it, which is also tiresome.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it is tricky, and there were a few accounts in the past that were when Twitter was still managed by grown-ups, that got deleted because they were just spreading too much misinformation, and that was glorious. Um, but this is going to sound a bit strange. I think that the accounts that purposefully work on spreading something, or whether it's wrong or not, or just something they wish was true, are perhaps slightly less dangerous than the accounts that don't care. Because there are also accounts that have millions of followers that just are a bot. They just have folders few of pictures and stories, and they just tweet, and you can correct them, and there can be community notes, and nothing happens. And they are shared by hundreds of thousands of people, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And the accounts that have a bias or an agenda or talk a lot of nonsense, they usually have a bit of a reputation, or if you start following them, after a while, you start to realize what they're about, and you can unfollow them, or at least you start to get a bit suspicious. With these bot accounts, you don't get that. You just think, oh, cool picture, cool story, let's share it.
All right, so 5 minutes left. So let me see. So this is a long sort of compound question.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you stand on the discussion of film TV not being a documentary, and therefore they can take great liberties with events, timeline, costuming with impunity? Whereas, in my opinion, it shouldn't be that much more difficult to do it as close to right as possible, and wouldn't that be more exciting? It troubles me that the viewing public will consider that film TV is fact when in reality it's so inaccurate.
Yeah, I agree completely. There are errors that film and television make that I have no problem with. I know how difficult it is to make film and television. I know that sometimes you just don't have the budget. You can't get the right costumes. You can't do pay the researchers. I get it. You know, when someone says we wanted to do it right, but we couldn't, fine, no problem. But so often, almost always, the errors that you see are based on laziness or lack of bothering, and or just not doing your job properly. For instance, in the 1930s, all the men, except for a few bohemian artists, had very short hair. Very
Hmm.
short. It wasn't supposed to touch the color. That was the fashion. Every World War II photo you see, you notice that. Yet, still, so many World War II films, you see long hair on men,
Hmm.
just modern hairstyles. It doesn't cost any more money for the hair department to clip a bit. You know, cut it a bit
Yeah.
shorter. There you go, done. So they just either they don't know or they don't care. Either way, it's lazy, it's stupid. Um, in many cases, doing it right doesn't cost any more work or any more money, and often it makes the film or the project so much better, and it makes it timeless. For instance, it is almost impossible to look at a 1960s or 1970s World War II film because the hairstyles are insanely 1960s. If you make a good World War II film, it can be, people will watch it in 100 years and it will still be fine. I remember working on a very, very big film where they said we spent a big chunk of our budget on renting an actual World War II bomber to fly over to drop something
Oh,
for the resistance. And I said, well, if you asked me in advance, I would have told you that most of those droppings were done by very small planes.
right.
Those planes, Lysanders, I've got a mate who got one of those, and he'll come and fly over for a crate of beer. You would have had a couple of million extra for your film.
Yeah.
Um, well, they were not happy to hear that. But, you know, that's what you get for not getting an historical consultant involved right away. But yeah, if you do it right, it makes the project so much better. And you notice that in everything. There are historical television series that people say, "Oh, I don't really know what the story is about, but it's such a nice thing to look at." It's the difference between a film being a 6 on IMDb or an 8.
Hmm.
Just make it look good, make it authentic. And if it is realistic and people go, hang on, that's not authentic, and they start Googling it and they realize that it is authentic, they go, wow, this show is really good. You get the bonus, you know, because the other way around, anyone can look up if something is correct or not. And they do it in the cinema on their phone, which
Yeah.
everyone hates. But you know, you can no longer get away with it. If you make a film and halfway through your viewer already knows that you know, you put a 1950s plane in a 1920s scene, and he's going, well, what? You're already losing your viewers. You're looking a fool. So, you know,
Hmm.
just do it right. Come on.
Fair enough. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
You're very welcome.
Really appreciate it. And thanks everybody for coming to listen. And that's our time. So go into your next sessions.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
everybody.
Hey,